Welcome back to our Backstage YouTube series, and we are in episode number 4, where we're going to see the complete platform in action. If you missed any of the previous episodes, you can go back and watch them. There is a link in the description to all 3. And now let's see what we're going to do in this episode. So imagine you're a developer, you arrive on a Monday morning, and by lunchtime, you have the following setup. You're authenticated with your corporate single sign-on. You've created a microservice via a template. You've deployed through GitOps, and you're running in production. Is this real? We'll find out. But yeah, it's close. We can get close to this. So 0 tickets, 0 waiting. Well, let's see. First off, GitOps with Argo CD. For those that are not familiar with the concept of GitOps, think of your Git as the single source of truth. And then you have an application, it could be Argo CD, it could be Flux, that constantly monitors your Git. And upon any changes that happen in your Git repo, it will deploy into a Kubernetes cluster. Now let's talk about GitOps with Argo CD for folks who are not familiar with this concept. GitOps is basically the idea that you have some product, some application monitoring your Git repos, and then based on what it sees, if there are any changes, it will automatically deploy into Kubernetes. So the CD part of Argo CD is continuous deployment. There are other tools like Flux that can do that as well, but the idea is simple. Instead of traditionally having to push to deploy to Kubernetes and not knowing who changed what and drift unknown, we're using this GitOps methodology to pull from Git, having a Git history, having a way to automatically detect any drift between what is declared and what you want the end state to be versus what actually is deployed in your environment. So this is a way to deploy continuously and iterate quickly with your applications. And our workflow is pretty simple. We saw before how we can use templates, and we build all our standards from an organization inside the templates. And the template will pretty much allow your developers to fill out a form, and from there, it will create a GitHub repo for you. And based on the actions, it can build the Argo CD application and then ultimately deploy into Kubernetes. So 10 minutes from idea to production, you're able to get this done. Of course, there's a lot of work that has to be done from the platform engineering team to get to this place of self-service for your developers. And it's always the 80-20 rule or 90-10 rule, where you're going to have edge cases, of course, but for the most part, you're going to think through your developers' workflow and see where you can standardize, and then you can eventually get to a point where you're reducing a lot of time for onboarding new developers and new applications. So what gets created automatically? Like I said, a GitHub repository, your CI/CD workflows, Kubernetes manifests, an Argo CD app, catalog entry as well. So one form, everything is generated through that template. The business impact is incredible. So time to production can be under 10 minutes. You don't need to file any tickets. Manual config is 0, and security best practices are once again embedded inside of your workflow. So we're going to demo this end to end. So we'll see the full authentication flow, the template to repository, the CI/CD execution, the Argo CD deployment, and the visibility inside of Backstage. And this finally brings everything together as we conclude this demo series, and we will see how we can do this end to end with our labs. So let's jump in. Just a quick plug before we continue. This video is part of my Backstage 101 course, where we dig much deeper into the internals of Backstage and how to build a real internal developer portal. We cover the service catalog, software templates, tech docs, auth, search, and even how to deploy it to production. The course includes over 35 hours of video and 11 hands-on labs. You also get a certificate and a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you're interested, check it out in the description below. All right, let's get back to our lesson. Now let's go ahead and navigate to section 7 and Backstage in production with GitOps and enter this lab. And this is an advanced lab where we are going to be using Argo CD. Oops. Production architecture overview here. We have a Minikube cluster and a few namespaces inside of the Backstage namespace. We already have Stage as a pod, Postgres, another pod, and namespace for Keycloak, where we have a Keycloak pod, and then Argo CD also will have its own namespace. And then we have a few other namespaces, and for order service, one for a user service, one for your own app, and each app deployed by Argo CD is. So this lab is pre-configured with a few things. Backstage is already set up in the Backstage namespace with its Postgres database. Keycloak, single sign-on with 3 users/groups inside the Keycloak namespace. Argo CD is also deployed, and an Argo CD Backstage plugin for deployment visibility, and a Golden Path template skeleton is also ready for GitOps. We have a few credentials here as well. So we've got these 3 users have access into Backstage. The Keycloak admin console, you can access that with the username admin and this password. Argo CD UI also has this admin, and we'll deploy. We're going to get the password for it later in pressure. I won't spend too much time here, but really quick, the way this works is a developer works on their code. They push into Git. Git is the source of truth. Argo CD detects changes in Git, and it will sync those changes directly into Kubernetes. So it is continuously deploying your code into Kubernetes. You can have a manual sync or auto sync, but that's the idea behind Argo CD and GitOps. So step 1, let's verify that we've deployed everything. So we can run kubectl get namespace here. We can run kubectl get pods Backstage, Keycloak, and let's get Argo CD up. Now we need to authenticate into GitHub because Argo CD needs to do that. So github.com, HTTPS, authenticate with GitHub, yes, log in with a browser. Let's copy this one-time code. If you highlight, it will automatically copy. And then we need to open a new browser and go to here to verify this. Put in our code. Continue. Use the passkey. There we go. We're authenticated. Very good. Now let's store our credentials so we can run this command into our bash RC. Let's store that as well. And we can source bash RC like that. And you can just verify your username, and the token, piece of the token will show up. So we did all that correctly. Now to access Argo CD UI, we just need to run this command, which will give us the secret for Argo CD. We can copy that, and we can go ahead and log into Argo CD with admin. And there we go. You can explore that. You can look at the application. Really there yet. And user info. Story for the catalog. And we can do that from the terminal. So I have the repository already. It exists from before. So if the repository, if it exists, so let's do that. Okay. All right. The setup script has created a starter structure at root text. So let's go there. And here we can run git init. Let's see what's in. We can quickly take a quick look here, and we've got the catalog and a readme. So you can see all the different files inside, all.yaml file, components. So a lot of files in here. We won't spend too much time on this at the moment. Just know that we have this folder, and we are going to initialize it with git and configure our user. We're going to add, set the remote origin, our branch is main, and let's push this branch remotely to GitHub. All good. There we go. So we have it here in GitHub. If you want to double check, we can open it in a new window. And here's our repo with everything that we've pushed. All right, so we can see everything that's inside here. So understanding a catalog hierarchy, this catalog demonstrates the Backstage entity model for a fictional company called Tech Corp. So we have the entity type domain. This is a business area grouping. An example is e-commerce, all shopping related systems. And so an example of a system is the customer portal, front end, plus some APIs for shopping. A component entity is an individual sort application. The product API is an example. Resource, some infrastructure dependency. The product database, Postgres database is an example of that. And why this matters is the golden path templates lets developers select which system their new service belongs to. So we'll see that later. And without these predefined systems, the templates drop down would be empty. And this structure mirrors how real organizations model their software catalog. We'll see that when we start to create a new service with a template. Step 5, configure Backstage with GitHub credentials. So we need to do that. So we can go ahead and run a port forward in here, terminal 2. Clear and grab the ArgoCD password. Now is looking for Backstage, and we're going to save that. Let's make sure that our Kubernetes secret. And let's go ahead and restart Backstage. So we can do that with the rollout restart command with kubectl. We can wait for that as well. It looks like it's done. Now let's configure Argo CD with the GitHub credentials. Run this, create this new secret. Can recognize it. Created. It's clear. Let's go back forwarding. Let's verify the Backstage integration. So we can sign into Backstage, open the Backstage app. And step 6.2 here, verify key cloak integration. So go to home, user. You should see 3 users, Alice, Bob, and check also the groups. Developers. Now verify the catalog entities. So now verify the Tech Corp catalog entities you push to GitHub, that they're appearing in Backstage. It may take up to one to be discovered. So let's go ahead and look at the filter. That hasn't shown up yet. Maybe we can refresh real quick. And there we go. Just had it to wait a little bit. So if you go into filter now, you'll see all these show up, not just user and group. So if we go and take a look at domain, for example, here you see e-commerce, payments, platform, all these show up. And by the way, if you go in here and let me just show you this once more, clear And we're inside the labs developer portal. If I want to show you the app config, so if you run cat app config.yaml, and just pipe it with more here, the catalog and locations type is now URL. Remember in the past few episodes, we were seeing type is file, but now we're using type URL, and this URL is our GitHub repository that we just created. King to our username here, which is a variable that will environment variable that will be grabbed through Kubernetes, and the name of the repo that we created. And it's referencing the catalog all.yaml file, which is over here. So catalog YAML file. And make this a bit bigger. You can see that this is what it's referencing. So that's what got pulled into Backstage. The domains that we're talking about, systems, components, resources, all that got pulled in through that URL. Just a reference to it. It's what you want to do in production. You don't want to add different files into Backstage and restarting Backstage. You want Backstage to discover these automatically. So we've the domains, we can also, and here's one system, and this is actually tricky to see 3 systems. This tripped me up quite a bit. Make sure that you're not selecting owned, because I'm the owner of one of these, but there's actually 3 components here: catalog, backend, product API. And change the components so we can check components as well. And then finally, resource as well. Payment database, Postgres database, and a product database. Now we can also see relationships. So click on customer portal one. So we can go into a system like this one here. You can see you can view the source right here in the GitHub. You can see it belongs to the e-commerce domain down here. And what else? See here the relationships. So you can see that the customer portal is part of the product API, or has part in the product API, has part of the product database, and developers are the owners, and e-commerce has part of customer portal. We can also check that the Argo CD plugin is installed. The Argo CD plugin allows us to view deployments straight in context and move from move from Backstage to Argo CD. You can directly see your deployments in Backstage. So we'll see that in task 3. Show us anything that's expected. Verify that the template exists. So we can check create over here. You should see a Node.js microservice with GitOps right there. Click choose to preview the template details. Template and service scaffolding with TypeScript. It's also a Docker file, Kubernetes, Argo CD app for GitOps, GitHub actions, catalog registration. So we're not going to execute this just yet. We're going to do that in task 2, or we'll review the structure in task 2 and execute that in task 3. So what have we accomplished so far? We've verified our infrastructure is in place. We've got Backstage running Postgres. We've got Keycloak, single sign-on with users and groups. We've got Argo CD ready for GitOps deployment, and all the components are communicating properly, and it's all running in Kubernetes. The integration is configured. We have GitHub authentication for repo access. And we've got GitHub repo for catalog storage with a bunch of components, domain systems, components, resources, and Backstage secrets updated with credentials. Argo CD configured with GitHub credentials, and Argo CD is accessible and ready to go. Here are some of the catalog entities. Okay, next task is explore the GitOps enabled golden path template. So we'll do that. So this task is just for us to understand what the template contains. And then the next task, we're actually going to bring everything together and run the template. Explore the GitOps golden path template and template overview. So the template creates a complete production-ready Node.js microservice with the following. Here's our skeleton. So you can see we've got a source folder with an index.ts for TypeScript, package file, Docker file, catalog for Backstage integration, and we've got a documentation for the tech docs documentation, and we've got a Kubernetes manifest. So you can see a namespace YAML, deployment, service, an Argo CD for an Argo CD application. And we also have GitHub Actions workflow as well. So let's review that, and we can do that in the code editor. We can navigate to catalog, templates, Node.js, microservice, and template.yaml. Here's our template. We've seen templates before in a previous episode. It's of type template. And here are some of the parameters that we'll be grabbing from users. So service information, you can see it requires name, description, and owner. So we've got pages. The first one is service information with a few entries here. We have another one, technical configuration with system and port, a GitHub configuration with at least the repo URL, and then a few steps. So fetching the skeleton, publishing to GitHub, and registering in our catalog. We can also review the catalog info, which is a critical file, and that's how Backstage discovers and tracks your service. And this is found in catalog, templates, Node.js, microservice, skeleton, and then in here, right? So everything in the skeleton is what's going to be pushed over to a new GitHub repo with the new microservice we're going to build. So here it is. So examine the annotations here. You can see github.com project slug. This is where to find the source code. It enables the GitHub integration. Backstage IO tech docs. This is where to find the documentation that enables tech docs. And then the Argo CD app name. This is where the Argo CD application enables the Argo CD plugin. Next, let's examine the specs of type service. And lifecycle is experimental. So service is usually for backend service. And experimental is dev environment, not really a production environment. And then the owners, the team owner, we're getting that from Keycloak groups. And then the system, which system this belongs to. Let's take a look at the Docker file, and you can find the skeleton on the Docker file right here. Okay, so this is the Docker file with our Node.js. It has a multi-stage build. And then the Kubernetes manifests, so you'll find that in Kubernetes. And we have a few manifests to deploy. So you can see, and again, these are templating. This is templating with Nunchuck will be popped once Backstage pushes this with its scaffolder into the actual GitHub repo. So we have a namespace, we've got a deployment, we've got an Argo CD app and a service. And again, we are, as a platform engineers, we're building this for our developers. The developers will end up with final result, a GitHub repo with all the necessary to get started right away. Now review the Argo CD app. Here it is. A couple of things to note here is the source and destination. So under spec source, okay, so this is where GitHub, this is where Argo CD is going to track or for changes in GitHub. And upon any change, it will go ahead and deploy to the destination. In this case, it's deploying on the same Kubernetes server where Argo CD is running. So that's why we have kubernetes.default.svc. It's not always the case. You can have Argo CD deploy on a separate Kubernetes cluster, but we're running everything in a Minikube cluster, so everything is local. We also have a sync policy. So in this case, sync policy, sync options, create namespace is true. Note the manual sync, and this is a trigger sync in Argo CD. But in a production environment, you probably would automate this and run it automatically to auto sync automatically, so you don't have to worry about it. And you'll have at the PR level, the pull request level before you deploy with Argo CD. So understanding the GitOps flow, we have Argo CD detects a new application resource, connects to the GitHub repo. It reads the Kubernetes manifest from Kubernetes folder, compares the manifest to the cluster state. If they're different, Argo CD will show out of sync status. The developer or operator will click the sync in Argo CD UI. Argo CD applies the manifest to Kubernetes, deploys, and Argo CD will show synced. We can quickly review the CI/CD workflow. So if we're under skeleton.github workflows, here is the pipeline that we have for how we're developed there. It's pretty basic. They can add and understanding the complete flow. So developer self-service flow, the way it works is developer opens the Backstage create page. They select the Node.js microservice with GitOps template. They're going to fill out the template. They'll hit create. And then the Backstage template engine, which is a scaffolder, will do a bunch of things. It will process the skeleton files with user values and render them into a GitHub repository, pushes all the code manifests, the workflows. It will register the service in Backstage catalog. And then GitHub will have the following. The repository is created there with all its files. The GitHub Action CI runs on initial commit. The Docker image build and is pushed to the GitHub repository. Argo CD application manifest is present in Kubernetes. Argo CD now detects the new application resources in the repo, shows applications out of sync. The developer or operator triggers the sync. Kubernetes resources created in the service namespace. From a Kubernetes perspective, a new namespace is created for the service. Deployment is created, pods are scheduled, service created for internal access, and the application is up and running and healthy. And then there's the continuous delivery workflow. So this was the initial workflow, but then of course you will continue, or the developer will continue to push code. GitHub Actions will run for tests. A Docker image will be built and pushed to the repository. The manifests are updated with a new tag. Argo CD will detect the change, sync will trigger, and then the new version will get deployed. So it's not just day one. This workflow works for day N. Perfect. Let's continue and see this entire workflow in action. So complete developer onboarding and deployment. Here's our story. Jane joins Tech Corp. So Jane, developer, just joined Tech Corp as a backend engineer. Her manager asks her to get access to the developer portal, familiarize herself with the existing services, create a new order process for the e-commerce platform. So we're going to play the role of both the platform admin, setting up Jane's access, and Jane herself using the platform. So part one, the developer onboarding Keycloak. All right, so I'm a platform engineer or an IAM engineer that is responsible for onboarding a new developer in Keycloak. So we're going to go to Keycloak with admin, the password. All right, let's go to the proper realm, the Backstage realm to users. Some existing users are here. That's good. We're going to create a new user. So click add user and enable verified right here. Username was going to be Jane developer. Email is jane@techcorp.com. First name is Jane. Let's join her to a group and select the developers group. So we'll put her in the developers group. I think that's it. We don't need to do anything else here. We can create Jane. Next, we want to set Jane's password. So we're going to go to the credentials tab, create a new password for Jane, call it password. It's not temporary. Let's continue. Save the password. Jane is now fully configured as a member of the developers group. Now we're going to verify this in Backstage. So wait about 60 seconds for the catalog to sync. Then verify that Jane appears in Backstage. So let's jump to the Backstage app. Let's go to filter, go to user. And there we go. Jane finally shows up. You can see Jane developer, part of the developers team. Excellent. All right. So part 2, experience Backstage as Jane. So let's sign out and sign in as Jane now. Jane. Explore the developer portal. We can see the catalog, home on the left-hand side. Browse the different entities, systems, components, all here. We can also search. So again, Jane is new. Maybe the payments API, for example, you can see it here, or maybe a custom portal or a developer portal. You can see it right here. We can also click on docs, and we can see the different documentation that's available to Jane Payment API, for example, here in the portal. And then we can look for our template, which is really what we're trying to do here. So click on template and choose that. And we're going to start to create a service using this template. So this is the Node.js microservice with GitOps, create a production-ready Node.js microservice with Dockerfile, Kubernetes manifests, Argo CD application, and GitHub Actions CI/CD. So let's give it a name. Order service. And an owner. We're going to select the developers team, click next. From here, system, select the system you want. Payment processing maybe. Port 3000, database, whatever we prefer. Let's pick Postgres. Next. This is page 3. And the service. By the way, the GitHub owner has to be your GitHub username that we configured or authenticated with in task 1 for this to work. Repo visibility, public or private. We'll choose public. And then click review. So this looks okay. Fetch the skeleton, publish to GitHub, and now we can explore the results. So if you click on repository, we should be able to see the new repo order service right there. And we can see the plugin have been applied successfully. We have everything really we need. So we've got the GitHub workflow right here, CI/CD right here. We can probably see the actions, the GitHub actions already succeeded, which is excellent. And the README is fine. Our Kubernetes. What else? We can also check. We check the CI/CD. Oh, in step 3.7, configure GitHub Actions permissions. Before the CI/CD pipeline can push Docker images, you need to enable write permissions for GitHub Actions. So we need to do that. In the GitHub repository, we need to go to the Settings tab and click Actions General. General here. Let's see, where is it? Workflow permissions. Okay. See anything else? And check the box, allow GitHub Actions to create and improve that. Perfect. So why it's needed? By default, GitHub has read-only access for security, and for the pipeline, it needs write access to push the Docker images to the registry, and it is manifest back to the repository. So for production environments, you're probably going to be running with a GitHub org, not a personal account. So you could set this as an organization-wide default under your organization settings, actions, workflow permissions. And that way, any new repository that's created will automatically inherit these permissions, so we don't need this manual step. All right, we checked GitHub Actions. The tests ran correctly and all was good. Now let's take a look here for the GitOps part and deploying the service using Argo CD. So we need to register the Argo CD application, and the template created an Argo CD application manifest in the repository. We need to apply it to make Argo CD aware of our application. So we got to go into our terminal and go to the temp folder. We're going to clone the repo, and we're going to apply the manifest for the application. For private repos, for this one, we created a public repo, so we don't need to do anything. But for a private repo, we need to create an image pull secret for GitHub container registry. You probably will be doing that. And that's very simple. You create a namespace, the order service namespace, and you create a secret here with a Docker registry. So that's fine. But we can now look at the application in Argo CD UI, and you can see the application shows up here, order service. And the status will show out of sync, health is missing, that is fine. And we can review what's going to be deployed. So if we click on the order service right here. So these are the components that will get created: a namespace called order service, a service, a deployment, and the application. So if we click on diff, for example, it will show you everything that's going to be created. Obviously, everything is new here, so this is new. All right, so we can trigger the sync. Click the sync button. Nice. And that's it. You can see synced. Sync is okay. Okay, the app health is green and healthy, which is perfect. And we see our application is deployed. Here is a pod. Everything looks great. And what the sync did, it created the order service namespace, created the deployment of the service, pulled the Docker image from the repository. We can also verify this inside of the terminal. So if we clear here and we check the namespace we have now is order service. We just created that one, so we can change into that namespace. And from here, we can run a kubectl get all. And once again, here's our pod, our service, our deployment, our replica set. All has been created for us very nicely. We can also see the logs for this pod. It's listening on port 3000. Obviously, there's nothing really created yet for this application, but something showing that it is running. We can actually test it as well if we run the port forward like this and go over to our terminal 2 and run a quick curl. For the health endpoint, we see that health showing up here. Status healthy, server order service in version 1.0.0. So our application is running very well. Everything has been deployed. Jane did a great job and deployed our application within minutes. But let's see part 5. Let's see the full integration. So Jane now can also go back to her Backstage, go to home, and click on the order service that she just created. And from here, you can see some of the details. So things like the service name, the system that it's a part of, it's a production. Developers are the owners. You can see the Argo CD overview here. The instance is synced, healthy. You can go into the order service and you can see more information. You can open the Argo CD. There's also documentation, view the tech docs. Right here, we got documentation. We also have the Kubernetes tab showing up here for the service because we've integrated using the Kubernetes plugin as well. So we saw the Argo CD piece, but now we have a Kubernetes plugin as well to be able to see the health of or any logs that we need to. So Minikube cluster we got, and here's the pod that is running. And we don't have the metrics server. That's why we're not seeing CPU and memory. And we've got the service down here. And if we click on here, we can see the YAML for that pod. We can also see the logs for the pod, order service listening on port 3000. And the point of this is that Jane doesn't have to go anywhere other than the Backstage portal to see how Argo CD is performing, how her Kubernetes pods are performing, the services, the logs, all embedded neat. All right, continuous delivery in action. We can now make a change. So if we go back to the terminal and go into our folder order service, let's get origin main. We're going to edit the health point, the endpoint for the health endpoint message. Let's change that to healthy version 2, from healthy to healthy version 2. And we're going to commit. So it's as if Jane has made a change in the microservice and she's now done her change. She is adding, she's committing, and she is pushing. Of course, she wouldn't be pushing to main directly. She will open a PR or a pull request, and then there will be a peer review meeting. But for the sake of being fast here, we're just pushing straight to main, but you won't be doing this in production. Now watch the pipeline. So opening the GitHub repository in a browser and going back to our actions pipeline, you can see the pipeline is now running. The first job is completed successfully. The build and push is running. We're building the new Docker image and the push is complete. Updated the Kubernetes manifest, and all is good. This pipeline has succeeded. So let's go back here. And since this has succeeded, we got to go and look at Argo CD, and let's refresh. If you don't refresh, it will take 5 minutes for it to automatically refresh. But notice now we're out of sync. So if you're running auto sync, this will automatically sync for you. But let's check the diff here and see what difference do we have. And there it is. The image is different, right? We're pulling a new image, and that new image has this new endpoint for the health. So if we click on synchronize, that will go ahead, create a new replica set for us, which will generate a new pod. If we wait long enough, the old pod should get deleted. You can see it's already working here. While this happens, let's go back and run the terminal port forwarding again to test the new endpoint that we just created. So we're going to run this again, and notice the difference now. Status is healthy version 2. So we've successfully migrated or moved to the next version of our application, as you can see, and it's very seamless. It was just a matter of making the change as a developer, as Jane being the developer, making the change in her GitHub repo, and then pushing that change, and that automatically triggers Argo CD to deploy directly, and you can see the new pod is deployed, the old pod has been deleted. Congratulations on completing this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new and are a lot more knowledgeable in terms of developer portals and specifically Backstage. If you want to learn a lot more and dig deeper with hands-on labs, do check out my course Backstage 101 in the description of this video. I'll see you in another video.